Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. If you are listening to us up north where you had that snowstorm, come on down. The idea behind these is to go deeper into the history, the psychology, the spirituality of the 12-step recovery process. We have as our guest today Laura Swann, who is the author of a new book. For those of you watching on YouTube, it's titled Men and Emotions. It is a thing. It is a thing. And Laura holds a master's degree in education and is also a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Teaches here in Austin at several colleges and universities. Also maintains an active private practice in Georgetown, Texas. Part of that is a men's group that she's excited about and that makes up a good portion of the book that she has written just recently. So, Laura, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me back.
Good to have you here. Laura and I go back centuries in the field, so we're old timers who've been around for a while. Seen a lot of changes, some for the better, some for the worse. But there you go. Change is constant. Laura, in our last episode, you took us through the first 8 of some 19 strategies that you've identified. And I think it's safe to say they're helpful for men, but they're also just as helpful for women. And employed properly, they can aid in supporting advanced emotional health. So let's continue going through your list, and we'll start with number 9. Which I suspect is one of your favorites, music. Why do you include music as a strategy, and what are some ways that it can be employed?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last week about music, just barely got into it, and I shared a little bit about the connection with the client that I had such a hard time connecting with. Yeah. And he began to bring his music into our appointments, and it connected us. So that's one way that music really connects us. It also can change the brain's chemistry. It can help, dump some dopamine, reduce cortisol levels. I mean, it does a number of things in terms of really helping calm our central nervous system.
Yeah, chanting, drumming, things of that nature, very, very helpful, calming, tranquilizing. We've lost touch with that. And the music has to be of a certain quality. This is what I've learned from what little reading I've done in it, that, kind of rock music isn't going to calm you down too much.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think the key word there was vibration.
Vibration, okay.
And the vibration can affect our central nervous system, and different vibrations have different effect on our nervous system. And I think that's probably even true with different people across the board, So I think it's like any of these strategies that I talk about at the very beginning of this chapter, is you've got to try them out, and you got to see which fits for you, which is most helpful, which, of all of the types of music that's available today, which one is helping you achieve the benefits you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Yeah.
You got to stay open-minded to that. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Number 10 is sleep, and you break it down into 4 stages. I wonder if you could possibly walk us through those 4, if you have them handy, and tell us what each is about.
Yeah, I think people underestimate sleep a lot, and especially when we're younger, young adolescents, young adults, when we look at sleep in substance use dependence. Mm-hmm. I mean, what type of consistent sleep is anybody getting with, addiction? Mm-hmm. And it's not good. You ask anybody, their sleep patterns are very messed up. And I think it is something that is very much overlooked. So sleep is divided really into 4 stages. And the first 2 stages, 1 and 2, are really transitional phases. So they just help us transition into the really important stages of sleep, which are 3 and 4. And 3 is what they call restorative sleep. And restorative sleep is all about our bodies, physical body, and it's about restoring tissue, helping our immune system to reset, healing. And then the 4th stage is
physical healing that's going on in the body.
Yes, physical healing. And people don't realize, like, when they are injured or something, happens to their body physically, whether it's a broken bone or an organ inside that needs healing, that healing happens, majority of that happens when a person's sleeping, because when a person's awake, the body has so much energy and so much effort going to just keeping the body doing the daily task. Mm-hmm. But when we sleep and the body kind of shuts down, that's when majority of the healing happens. And so it's essential for our bodies to be able to heal physically and emotionally. And so that stage 4 is the REM sleep. And that's the emotional, that's rapid eye movement. And rapid eye movement is also connected to the EMDR process. And we can talk about that a little bit later. But when we sleep and we go into that deep stage of REM, our eyes will move back and forth. And what's happening is our body is resetting emotionally. It's putting stuff in storage. It's processing memories. It's also incredibly important for emotional regulation. So our bodies learn to help emotionally regulate during that 4th stage of sleep.
This might be a good time to repeat what we mentioned, or you mentioned in the first episode of the series, that there is a difference between feelings and emotions. And what you're telling us now is really relates to that emotional reset that's going on physically, that the emotions are physical rather than feelings, which might be more psychological. Could you go into that a little bit deeper once again, maybe in terms of the sleep thing that you're talking about?
So let me make sure I understand your question.
Yeah.
You're asking the difference, to kind of repeat the difference between emotions and feelings.
Right.
And then how that relates to the sleep part?
Well, when you were mentioning how the emotions are resetting during sleep, it reminded me of the difference between feelings and emotions. Does that make sense?
Thinking about that for a little bit. I think in that last stage of sleep, that REM, both feelings and emotions can get kind of wrapped up into that emotional, or that emotional reset. Mm-hmm. And I think in that 3rd stage of sleep, the restorative, it's really focused on more physical parts of our body, of healing a wound or a broken bone or our immune system or, the liver, or that is more restorative in terms of the physical. And then the 4th stage of the sleep has more to do with those thoughts and feelings of our emotional reset.
Yeah, no, that's...
Yeah.
I don't think I was too far afield.
No, that made sense. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding your question.
Because, there's some research going on. Bill Wilson explored LSD, psychedelics, and their effect. He had, of course, in his detox, a spiritual experience of some sort, a psychic change that he underwent. He was very interested in doing research on that because he was kind of convinced if we can help people experience that, to know that there is a 4th dimension of some sort and help them gain access to it, he thought it would help recovery quite a bit. So it got shut down in the 70s and 80s, but it seems to be coming back.
Yeah.
There's some renewed interest in the scientific community.
Yeah, there definitely is. I don't know that much about it. I prepared a little bit only because it's a question that comes up when I'm teaching, because
Right.
many of the students are curious about it, and so they ask questions. So I've prepared a little bit in terms of just reading and understanding, both ketamine therapy or for depression, and there's a number of different drugs that they're using for that. So.
And it does pose some dangers. I mean, some of us can get addicted to anything and everything. So caution needs to be. And Wilson, I think, he was cautious in how he approached it. He approached it under medical supervision. He took it himself, and he was convinced that there was a lot to it. He was also very interested in vitamin D therapy. Excuse me. Vitamin B.
B for the emotion part, for sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's go on to something we know a little bit more about, both of us, and that's reframing. Reframing, number 11. What is that strategy about?
Reframing is basically glass half empty or glass half full. It's pretty simple, but many times in our recovery, it's easy to focus on some of the negative things or the challenging things, or to put more energy there than maybe a different way to look at it. I don't know if you've ever read the book, help me with the title, New Pair of Glasses.
Sure, Chuck C.
Chuck C. It's basically his philosophy of, a new pair of glasses, we look at it differently. It's just a way to reframe it. I was talking to one of my clients recently, and they were talking about this encounter that they had with a person that they got really frustrated with and really angry. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the conversation, he paused to himself and he thought, I wonder what this person is going through right now. I wonder what is making this person so angry, why they seem so. So he tried to reframe it from their side versus his frustration around being treated that way. And so he looked at it more about, I wonder if this man is really, just lost a person who was important to them, or, whatever's going on in his life versus just his perspective of it.
Yeah, and don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Which oftentimes that is exactly what we tend to do.
Yeah. And reframing, it's important to know that reframing is a mindful practice. If it's what we talked about in those 9 principles of being mindful, because it's really easy when somebody is bowing up or something's happening that you don't necessarily like, it's really easy to see it from this perspective. You've always seen situations like that. So to shift into a different perspective requires us to be very mindful about, maybe I can stop right here, pause, and reframe. Maybe I can see this from a different perspective.
And to know the perspective that is your normal one, which may be very negative, can be very helpful.
Well, and it's like this gentleman said, my client of mine, he said, Laura, the greatest thing about it was my central nervous system didn't get all caught up in it. And I was able to stay calm and not get, caught up in it. And that's a bonus to that whole situation, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Keep our heads while those about us are losing theirs. It's
hard to do sometimes. It's really
hard.
difficult.
Very hard, but worth it. But worth it. Number 12 is the gift of tears, crying. You say there are different kinds of tears. I found that very interesting. Tell us about those and why it's important for emotional health.
I love this one. Golly, crying is, I believe tears are kind of the pressure outlet to the soul.
Nice.
And not everybody, cries. It's, I think different people, again, different strokes for different folks. There's a lot of ways to let our energy, again, we're talking energy, to let our energy out. But tears are it's another way to do that. And when you speak of the different tears, science discovered a number of different tears. And by different, I mean their molecular structure. If you were to look at them under a microscope, the tears are different. And we have lubricating tears that just help our eyes in lubrication. We have tears that react to like onions and allergies, and those just help cleanse the tears. And then we have what are called psychic tears, which are emotional. I like to call them emotional tears that have chemicals in them that help calm us. And it's just amazing how the body is designed. And when you look at how intricate it is, and these tiny little things that just make a difference. Emotional tears are tears letting go of emotion, and they have chemicals in them that help let go of, the stress of what's happening.
Yeah, you feel very different after a tear session.
I love that.
Something has changed inside.
It has. And what happens is that we let go a lot of the stress hormones like cortisol and all of those things that are creating a lot of stress. And we we have a lot of the chemicals that help calm our body. And so that's what happens in a really good emotional cry is we have that exchange of letting go of a lot of the energy that is tense and tight and causing stress, and the manufacturing or the creation of new energy that is calming.
I did Richard Rohr's Men's Rite of Passage many years ago, and several days session. And one of the days was devoted to tears, and a number of exercises that the men went through, putting ashes on themselves. We're very physical kinds of behavior. But then the instructions were to go out, sit under a tree or a cactus in the desert kind of deal. And I thought of my son, who at the time was in Iraq. He was in the Marine Corps. And I had tremendous fear that he was going to come home in a box. That was the image that I had. And I got in touch with that fear, which I had probably been pushing down. I allowed it to come up, and I cried for an hour. And while he triggered the tears, there were deeper emotions that had also been bottled up. It was like all sorts of stuff just came pouring out. It was just amazing and cleansing.
What a beautiful story. And it takes me back to last week when we were talking about sitting with emotions.
Yeah.
You gave yourself permission to sit with emotions, and then you gave yourself permission to get in touch with first fear, and the fear, and what a fear as a parent to experience that, is he going to come back in a box, or is he going to come back okay, or all, dismembered or whatever. And there's probably, I can't even imagine what that would feel like. So you gave yourself permission to experience that, as well as once those emotions kind of started coming up, like you said, all kinds of other emotions.
Yeah, there's no control after a while, it just a floodgate opened.
Yeah. And then so how did you feel after that floodgate opened?
Changed, more connected. Nothing changed in terms of my fear, but I felt more connected to the emotional stuff that was happening within me and didn't have a way to register fully. You know what I mean? I was pushing it down. It was the old beach ball thing.
Yeah.
Pushing the fear down. or acting it out in other ways.
Well, and Kyle, what a great point you bring up there, because many people feel like the purpose of sharing their emotion is to bring about change. And that's not it. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does bring about some change, and sometimes it'll bring about a shift within us, or maybe a shift in the situation. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is so the beach ball doesn't grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and explode, and that stuff come out sideways. It's about our emotional health. It's about taking care of our emotional health so we don't stockpile emotions. And you felt much better after that experience of letting go of a lot of that emotion and having permission to do so.
Exactly. Of course, then the alternative strategy is rumination, which is number 13. Thinking about it and thinking about it.
And thinking about it.
Yeah, replaying those tapes over and over again in our minds. Talk about that.
And then ruminating, it can be a killer to our recovery, because we can get stuck on something and really begin to brood. And brooding is where we just spend hours and hours of, just thinking about it and playing out different scenarios, and scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. And that can be very detrimental. And the reality of that, all those scenarios we play out and every bit of what we worry about, there's scientific evidence, depending on what you pick up, that 90 to 95% of what we worry about never happens. And so, all of that worry and that ruminating doesn't do anything but affect our bodies in a negative way. It affects our central nervous system. So our central nervous system is not calm and functioning in a healthy way, because our central nervous system, when it's amped up all the time, it affects everything inside of our body. I mean, our body has a hard time functioning. It increases all the inflammation, which increases, the stress that it puts on all the organs and our heart, everything. So keeping our central nervous system calm, we talked about that last week, that through, yoga and meditation and those type of things, that's a really important thing. Ruminating and brooding just adds to that stress and adds to our central nervous systems being amped up.
Anything positive about rumination?
I think it's
milder form.
Yes. And it's good that you bring that up, because there is a difference between, ruminating and brooding. And it's good we can't ignore problems, right? I mean, we can't act like they're not there. We have to address them, but we think about it, we address it, we make a plan, we implement the plan, and then from there, that's it. We're done. We have to learn how to manage that and to contain that, and not to spend the rest of the day brooding about it or playing out all the scenarios. If I do this, this will happen. We have to be able to evaluate and know what to do with situations, but not spend too much time, brooding.
Drummond was a popular read, Henry Drummond, in the early days of AA. The Greatest Thing in the World was one of the books that he wrote. He had several suggestions. One was, after you've made a decision prayerfully and you examined it from as many perspectives as you can, once you've made that decision, let it go. Don't keep going back to it. And that's what rumination is about, isn't it? It's never letting it go.
Yeah, it is. Well, and I think it gets into resentments, which is another big topic in recovery, when we carry all those resentments. And it's like a lot of times with clients, I'll talk about the backpack analogy or the bus analogy, where we just keep putting all of this stuff on the bus. And we have to really think about what we want to let on our bus. We're all driving this bus of life, right? And we stop and the doors open, and do we let on these resentments and this anger and this energy that gets on? And I kind of picture it, walking up the stairs of the bus, and here's this energy, and it's a big black blob, and it's just, or a big, piece of dirt or whatever it is just something that is not positive light. And we have to decide what we let on and off, or, what is in our head and what's not in our head. And
some of those suckers sneak on the bus, though, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's back doors to the bus.
Yeah, that's right. They get on there.
They climb in the windows. And that's a really good point, because there's many times that all of a sudden I find myself, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about that for probably 20 minutes, ruminating on that, and not even realizing that I'm ruminating on it, right, and being stuck on it and playing out all these negative scenarios. And I don't notice it until my body becomes tight, or my shoulders or my stomach feels sick.
We need to pay attention to our bodies. They're telling us something, and we need to learn to listen to them, not just to our minds.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, our bodies, Bessel van der Kolk, he's a excellent author, science researcher, MD. He's wonderful man in the psychology field, and he wrote a book called The Body Keeps Score.
Right.
And it is one of the books that I would recommend if you're interested in how the body keeps score. It's amazing. I mean, it really talks about how the body keeps all of that stuff. When we're constantly ruminating and we're constantly carrying that stuff, the body will keep score.
Yeah. Let's pause the tape here. You got something ringing up back there?
I don't, but I hear it, and it sounds like maybe some...
It's birds.
Birds.
But we'll let them in.
Yeah, we
will let them in.
We kind of like birds. That's what I thought it was. We like... Is that on your end?
No, it's on you. It's coming from yours. Well, welcome the birds. We'll run this tape. We're not going to stop it. That's a beautiful bird. That's a beautiful bird. You got some nice birds up there in Georgetown, right?
I know, but I can't imagine that would be a bird.
Yeah. Well, lovely. Lovely.
That's kind of interesting, isn't it? He sounds like he's ruminating.
No, he's singing for joy.
Okay. See, there's the reframe.
There's the reframe. He's singing for joy. St. Francis sent that little sucker. So that's good. That's good. Okay, number 14, a strategy that often gets overlooked, the power of the breath. Talk about that.
Power of the breath. Our breath is so connected to our body again. Here, we're back to talking about our body, and we can calm our central nervous system just through breath. Closing your eyes for 2 minutes and taking a very deep breath. And in the book, I explain belly breathing from a very deep place. And if we just take 4 or 5 deep breaths, that can calm the central nervous system. So it's important. And there's lots of therapies. I remember one time, it was when you were still out at Austin Recovery, and I came to one of the Super Saturdays. I used to love those. Those are great. I came to a number of those, but they had breath work one Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah. And I loved that. It was a whole, an hour and a half or so of nothing but breath work. That it was just great.
Combined with music.
Yeah, there was a combined with music. And I also came to one of the drum ones, the music one. That was really great too. The thing I liked about those, and I wish somehow we could get those started, because they were very much like the strategies in the book, these 19 strategies. But what was so great, it wasn't people talking about them. It was, we were experiencing, it was experiential. And I wish there was some way that we could get something back again that was experiential like that.
It's exactly right. And, I was trying to run a treatment center for the poor. We didn't have much money.
Yeah.
So I was always on the lookout. Well, what is cheap that can really be effective, and breathing is free.
No, it is. It's free. And people don't realize how powerful it is.
Exactly.
It is. Yeah.
Affirmations, number 15. What are they about?
Affirmations. People laugh about this, and Saturday Night Live has even done a skit with, kind of a little satire of affirmations, making fun of it. But in the reality is the research is pretty solid on how neuroplasticity, which just means our brain's ability to adapt over lifetime. And our brain is malleable. It can change. We used to think that it was kind of set in after a certain time, but
Right.
science now knows that, our brain is adaptable. It can change. And daily affirmations, when we sit around all day and we tell ourselves that, oh gosh, I know I'll always relapse the rest of my life, or, my mom's never going to forgive me, or whatever, we stay in these negative thoughts, we create that reality in many ways. And in the book, I think I don't think I put a quote in there from Henry Ford when he made the quote of whether we think we can or we think we can't, we're right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the truth. I mean, so affirmation is about shifting our mindset from what we can't to what we can, and whether that's about our self-image or how we feel about ourselves or our self-efficacy, how effective we are in our workplace or our relationships. It's about believing in what we have to bring to the table. And if you're feeling stuck and you don't feel like you have a lot to bring to the table, it's our ability to go find more to bring to the table.
This is one of the things that I really love about two-way prayer, in that in the process, I am listening to an alternative voice than my ego voice. My ego voice is set on negative. Mm-hmm. I mean, from my earliest days, that was the default position. Well, there's another voice inside my head that I began listening to some 33 years ago now. And that voice is honest, pure, unselfish, and most of all, loving. That was the thing that they insisted on, that it must be loving. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm in turmoil or in fear, there is another voice. It's not an affirmation, it's a communication from a deeper part of self. Alternate part of self. Mm-hmm. The goal is to become more like that. And its goal, of course, this is Jungian, is to become more like me. So it's the shadow being realized, owned, but then transformed. Mm-hmm. Transformed.
I can really relate to that, Bill.
Yeah.
With the story of my academic career early on, mm-hmm. because of the dyslexia.
Yes.
And so from about fourth grade on, my thoughts about myself were, I'm stupid.
Right.
I can't achieve. Right. I'm never going to be able to read. I might as well just forget that. I won't be able to read. I'll never succeed. I had a lot of those thoughts, and they were compounded over the years of my early education. Yeah. And so, like you said, I lead for many, many, many years. I led with that. Right. Because that was the way my brain formulated my thoughts around myself in my academic world.
Right.
And after being diagnosed with dyslexia and recovery was huge. After the combination of those two, I was able to reframe and begin affirmations around I am smart, I am capable, I have a lot to bring to the table. And that voice became more loving mm-hmm. than it did more challenging from my early years.
Yeah. We're not stuck with one voice. There are a number of voices in our heads,
Right.
and
Well, and I want to acknowledge those voices. Many times we come by them very innocently and unaware, I mean, those voices are not something that we choose to latch onto. I knew no different.
that's right. They take up a quarter of our mind, and there they are.
At least.
And addiction is like that too. I mean, that's so
It
important
is.
for people to realize. I mean, gosh, if you're new to recovery out there and you're listening to this, and you've got a part of your mind that is saying, "Oh, go take a drink," or go shoot up. Well, don't be ashamed of that. Realize that voice is there. You've been listening to it. It's telling you something positive at the same time. This is a little tricky, but you're not doing something to have fun, to have enjoyment, to connect with life in some way. So you're going to fall back to the last security you knew. This was one of the hallmarks that I got early in recovery from a therapist. You're going to go back to the last security place you knew inside your mind. For the addict, what is that? It's doing the drugs, doing
Right.
the food.
That's right. Well, and that's a neural pathway. What you're describing right there is a whole set of neurons in our brain that have
Right.
linked together and created this neural pathway
Right.
that believes that.
Yeah.
And I tell a lot of my clients early on in recovery, it's really normal. Not everybody will have them. Some will, some won't, but it's not abnormal to have that experience of getting really, our central nervous system getting really amped up, really out of whack.
Right.
And then the first thing that the brain does is go back to that neural pathway and responds in a way that sounds something like, oh, I know how to get rid of that feeling. I know what to do. I know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
And that's the link to, whether it's, going out and smoking a joint or shooting up or having a drink, because that's what the brain has known for a long time to get rid of that anxiety or that stress or that depression or loneliness or whatever that experience is.
That's right. But the brain has neuroplasticity, as we call it.
Yeah,
It can change,
that's right.
but it's going to take some time often.
That's right. And I think that's why over years you'll hear people say, I don't really think about using anymore, or I don't really ever think about that, because the brain has changed that way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's created a new neural pathway.
I just like to hold on that there's one little neuron in there that it never goes away.
Well, I wonder about that sometimes, because it's just like earlier when I was talking about these thoughts that about, you're not smart, you're stupid. I still, to this day, I mean, it's been 30 some years.
Right.
And to this day, if I get in front of a very, very academic, or what I deem, a lot of times it's in my own head that all of these people are so academically achieved and they've written 500 books and they've articles and they're, all of this. That part of me, that little neuron that you're talking about, that little can still get sparked and maybe I'm not, maybe they're going to find out I'm an imposter, or maybe they're going to find out that I'm really not the smart person. Maybe I am so I do believe that, those things can still linger on. We just have to do those 9 strategies, back to the 9 strategies, paying attention.
And stress can bring them out.
Yes.
And if we're not paying attention, then they're more likely to come out as well.
That's right. And that's why there's a significant correlation between high stress levels and relapse. And that's why it's so important to keep our stress levels low and to really work on our central nervous system being in check and not
Or
all amped up.
if the stress level is high, and sometimes you can't avoid that,
That's right.
then you have to compensate with greater focus on your own spirituality and watchfulness and doing those things. Acknowledge, I'm in a stressful period right now.
Right. And the strategies, and use your strategies more. Yeah. And I'm glad you noted that, because we can't avoid stress. I mean, stress is in our life. So if you're in recovery and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this stress-free life, good luck, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way. But stress will happen. The main thing is when it does, how do I deal with it?
Exactly. And I can't wait till it's overwhelming. Then it can often be too late. This is why, there is no cure for alcoholism. What we have is a daily reprieve based on our spiritual condition.
Mm-hmm.
So this spiritual condition needs to be worked on continuously, which brings us to, well, let's see. We are, next, number 16 is being of service to others. Step 12.
Yeah.
How does that help?
Yeah, I think 16, 17, 18, 19 all kind of interlink in some ways, Okay. But 16 is being of service. There's enough research, that shows being of service changes our brain chemistry. It changes our body chemistry. It releases good hormones and chemicals in our body that help us feel good.
We're meant to be of service. It's natural.
We are. The other thing that I hear people talk about a lot, the men in my men's group talk about this quite a bit, because a number of them do an H&I, which is a hospital institution meeting, where they take a meeting out to the hospital or institution. And they talk about, it gets them out of their own head. And a lot of times, if they're into me, kind of selfish thinking about, which is part of the disease, me, then getting out of your own head, getting out of your body and going out to somewhere else can help you get out of your head and help somebody else. That feels way better than being in your head ruminating.
Again, I'm going to go back to two-way prayer. If you're listening to the voice within and following the guidance of the voice within, you are then being of service on a daily, continual basis. It's a shift. Mm-hmm. I don't have to go out there and necessarily serve people. I have to pay attention to what it is God is asking me to do this day in my life. Mm-hmm. You've changed that switch, and you're immediately into the positive things that you're talking about, Laura. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why this two-way prayer thing, fellas and ladies, we got both listening here. It's not just a nice thing to do. It was the basis of the 12-step system, and it got lost. And if there's one thing I'm going to do before I drop dead, is do everything I can do to get this out
back
to the world, because it's free, and a lot of people do not have access to therapy. And if you get nothing else, you got 5 minutes every morning of sane living as you plug into that which is already within you. Mm-hmm. There is a part of you, of each one of us, that is sane, that is honest, pure, loving, unselfish, all those good things. And it has work for us to do in the world.
I so believe that, Bill. I think every single person inside of them has everything they need to heal.
Right.
To have that relationship with their spiritual creator.
Right.
To have that two-way prayer. I believe every person has the ability to create that.
Exactly. And that's the purpose of the steps, is to, clear away the wreckage of the past and the blockages that interfere with it, and start living it out.
One of the things that I do in class, for some reason, when I'm teaching about recovery and we get into the 12 steps, I used to, I don't know, 15 years ago, there wasn't a lot of resistance to the 12 steps, but for whatever reason now, there seems to be some, not a lot, it just depends on the class, but there's some resistance to the 12 steps. One of the things that I do that has been just amazing in class is I break the students into groups and I have them each take a step. And then I have them go into the research and I have them look at what happens within each one of those steps. I don't want them to get focused on the step. Don't talk about the step. I want you to find out what happens within each one of those steps therapeutically.
Exactly.
Therapeutically, that is going to help the individual if they practice that step.
That's right.
And so it takes the focus away from the 12 steps and it which eventually we bring it all back together. But for the moment, it takes the focus away so they can just focus on the therapeutic benefits of the 12 steps, which are enormous. And then at the end, we bring it back together as the package. And can you work with your clients and help them come to a place of feeling comfortable and embracing what happens with these 12 steps?
But if you become a 12-step fundamentalist, just like if you become a religious fundamentalist and you're just spewing, to go back to use your word, if you are just spewing cheap wisdom, people are going to blow it off.
That's right.
Well, the worst thing that's happened to the 12 steps, you know what it is? They become popular. That's the worst thing that's happened to them. And once they become popular, they become cheapened.
I hope not.
Same thing has happened to religion. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
As soon as Christianity became popular, look out. They lost it.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, if you just focus on the therapeutic benefits of each one of those steps it's just amazing and it's been really fun as an instructor. Students come up with all kinds of little things that I was like, oh my gosh, that's true. That happens in that step because, it's
that's right.
When they dig into the research, it's amazing how they can make so many additional connections that those steps offer.
Yeah. And in each one, there's really nothing new. There's nothing new.
Yeah.
These strategies, I would call them that maybe, have been around for as long as people have been around.
Right. Yeah.
We got to keep moving here, or we'll never get through this. So that was being of service to others. Number 17 is gratitude. Touch on that.
Same as the being of service.
Yeah.
When we can wake up in the morning, and I've been doing this practice for, 2 or 3 months now. First thing, when I wake up in the morning, I think to myself, what am I grateful for this morning? And it just starts the day in such a different way of it's the whole glasses half full or the positive thinking, what am I grateful today? Because every single day there is something to be grateful for. And the research.
We learned to be grateful for that little bird.
Yeah, we did.
It started off as a distraction. What the hell are you doing here, birdie?
I was wondering what it was. I kept thinking maybe it was your dog.
No. I wish you could sing like that.
Well, that's funny, yeah.
Which is interesting. It's interesting, what they say about meditation is when a distraction comes along, don't fight it. And there's the wisdom of the big book. We stopped fighting everything and everyone. We had to stop even fighting the birds.
Yeah.
Just bring them into the meditation. Beautiful background.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least. Well, education, you do touch on education before we move on. Education, what role does that play? What are we talking about there as a strategy?
As a strategy?
Yeah.
We can't do anything with what we don't know.
Okay.
So back to those 9 principles, when we're practicing our mindfulness and becoming aware, and when we become aware, God, I don't know much about that, and I want to know something about that, or it would be helpful for me to know more about two-way prayer or gratitude or whatever it is. And we live in a society today where there is plenty of good information. I'm not talking about just, the wealth of bad information as well, but, find your trusted resources.
Right.
Find your places that provide good information about whatever it is. If you want to know more about gratitude, read a little bit about that. If you want to know more about exercise, read a little bit about that. Get educated about recovery. Get educated about growing up in an alcoholic family. What are the characteristics and those type of things? It's easy to become educated so that you can make more informed decisions and continue to grow.
I'll tick a few 12-step fundamentalists off with this, but, grow beyond the big book too.
Yes, I agree. I think that the big book is key. And early in recovery, the 12 steps in the big book were huge. And I stayed focused on that and learned and educated myself. And then there came a time when I needed to educate beyond that. And I needed to learn more about my emotional self.
And I think the founders would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Go find your teachers, your spiritual teachers, your emotional teachers, your physical teachers. Become a whole person. But I mean, I'm 53 years sober, and like yourself, for me, the big book and some of that early material is foundational, but it's meant to be a foundation and to be built upon, not to just be never built upon and just revisited over and over and over again.
I agree with that completely. Yeah.
So hope I didn't make too many people angry out there. But if I did, pay attention to your emotions and use some of these strategies to deal with them.
And go buy this book right here. This you can learn more.
And make a little voodoo doll of Father Bill and poke those little pins in it. So the last one we wanted to touch on is spirituality and religion. First, how do you see them as different? And then how can each be of help?
Well, I think I saved this one for last because for me, I just don't know that I would be in the place I am without my spirituality and religion. I think it is my foundation of recovery. It's my foundation of life. It's my foundation of everything. I see the difference there's quite a bit of literature out there, that will help clarify this if we don't go into enough depth here. But I see religion as being more organized, with more set of doctrines and rules and
rituals too.
Rituals, yes. Rituals, certain practices, where spirituality is more of an kind of an internal, the person within decides what that looks like for them in spirituality. And I think they marry very well for some people. I think
but it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult.
It can be difficult. I mean, I know for me it was very difficult because...
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I had all kinds of spiritual wounds. I did not grow up in a religious home, but I had a lot of influences, and I grew up in the South, and I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and there were all kinds of tent revivals and hell damnation, and you're going to die if you don't do this. And it was scare you to death. And here I am in junior high, and it scared me to death to come, to Jesus or get saved because I didn't want to, die in hell. And that's not the way to create a healthy spiritual relationship. And I do not believe that God wants that for any of us. So I do believe there is spiritual wounding. I hope religion and spirituality, neither one of them ever engage in that. But we also live in a pretty broken world that I know that that stuff happens. So I think that's the biggest difference. I think the thing that for me with spirituality and religion, both, they both incorporate really important factors. And those factors are, things like hope,
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
We belong to a greater society or society greater than us. We believe that there is a being that is greater than us. Some call that God, some call it, the universe, or in AA, it's a higher power. So I think that in spirituality, there's probably a little bit more flexibility for people to.
AA decided very early it was going to be universal. So the principles, the language, they tried to make it as universal as they could. I mean, there are many Christian elements, there are many Jewish elements in it, religion is foundational to it, but they were very careful in not labeling it such to make that door wide open to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the inclusive piece of that includes all. And I know in my practice, my private practice, I work with a lot of individuals who have been spiritually wounded, some very severely, some less severe. Right. But it's a challenge. It can be a real challenge to, again, reframe, trust the neuroplasticity of our brains, and reframe and, create a healthy spiritual relationship with our Creator.
Exactly. And this is where finding books and teachers who appeal to you, who can open some of those doors for you to widen them, is going to be very, very helpful. Mm-hmm. And what is going to appeal to one may not appeal to another. And at one period in their recovery, it might appeal. And then 5 or 10 years later, well, I've outgrown that, we got to keep moving and keep developing and keep growing. Mm-hmm. And if you can find the way to structure that, then recovery doesn't get old. I mean, I read through a lot of people, well, I don't go to meetings anymore. I don't do this stuff, Well, you were not taught properly in terms of what this spiritual journey is all about. It's endless.
Yeah, I do believe that spiritual journey is endless. Yeah.
Well, listen, we have eaten up an hour, and the bird has the good sense to go on to do other things. So maybe our listeners need to do that as well. So let's leave it here. We will come back for a final episode, and we were kind of plotting and planning on what that might look like. We may try to, part of Laura's book, even the greater part of it, is little individual stories of men who have undergone emotional transformations, change, maturity, growing up. And so we're going to tackle that second half of her book in the next episode. May have a few guests on who would like to come and share. So we will work on that during the week. And you guys work on doing several things. One, send us a donation. That really helps support this channel. And invite a friend to the deal. Go on and like it. And if you dislike it, don't do anything. All right? So, just stuff that feeling. There you go.
Go ruminate about it.
Go ruminate about it. What the heck? Yeah. Laura, it's been fun. And I will look forward to next week. And you guys, tell a friend, invite them to join us, and keep coming back.